Okay, hello out there. Kelly, nod if you can hear me. Okay, perfect. All right, so the sound is working. Hi to everyone out there. I am Donna Coriel, the creator of SoMeDocs and the creator of this, one of our several series. We have aptly renamed this How to Physician. And the goals of this is to target physicians and to teach them. So we take physicians that have leveraged a particular field outside of medicine. We have them come on here and shine, and they pay it forward and help to teach you, our other physicians, the skill that they've leveraged. So welcome to this particular episode where we are featuring a fabulous physician and SoMeDocs member, Dr. Kelly Fradin. Let me just bring up her name right there. She's going to be coming up in just 1 second. She's going to be teaching us how she self-published her book in less than 1 month. So quickly, what is SoMeDocs? SoMeDocs is a space that helps to arm physicians with the tools they need nowadays to become a voice online. And we've got several resources that are growing that are really fantastic and unique. What if you're not a doctor? What if you're watching this, let's say on our website, and you're not a physician? Great. We welcome you too. We want to make an impact in healthcare. We want the patient finding the expert online without any difficulty. We don't want any middlemen involved. We want patients to simply click into the doctor that they want to follow and get the information straight from the source. And we are building incredible resources to do that. So stay tuned, subscribe, become members, and it's coming. All right. Conversations with Shem is our newest series. It's starting this Sunday. We have another series starting in the middle of November that we haven't announced yet, and it's going to be fantastic. So the physicians out there who want to take part and listen and grow, it's going to be fab. All right. So Conversations with Shem featuring Dr. Samuel Shem is his pen name. He wrote The House of God, and he will be hosting this repeating series starting Sunday for a 6-episode run. All right. And it's going to be live. So it's going to be interactive with an audience. Bring your physician friends. We're going to be talking about how to put the human back into medicine. If you're tuning in and you're wondering how you can see this later, we are actually it's going to be on the website. So you can literally access this talk after your work when you're sitting in your PJs. You can access it from home. So that being said, we are slowly transitioning out of live streaming into all of the Facebook spaces. We are only going to live stream into our YouTube channel, and you can access it through the website. There will be some live streams that will be accessed through the SoMeDocs public group and the SoMeDocs group, but for the most part, we're going to take out some of the live streams. So with that said, I'm going to take out my own. I'm going to actually take out mine, remove, and all right, that's good. Okay. All right. Let me, without further ado, bring on Dr. Kelly Fradin. Hi.
Hi. How
Can
are
I call you Kelly on, or would you prefer Dr. Fradin?
Kelly's fine.
Perfect. So Kelly, thank you so much for being here and for teaching us. Guys, for those of you that don't know, Kelly is a pediatrician and she is from New York. She's a mother of 2. So Kelly, let us know about who you are, what you're going to be teaching us. And actually, without further ado, I will let you on the virtual stage alone, and I will come back afterwards and ask questions from the audience. If you're tuning in, guys, give Kelly your love, post likes or hearts, and tell us where you're tuning in from. If during her conversation, something really resonates, write it down. Let us know in the comment section. And don't forget to leave your questions there because we can actually ask her and get her immediate live response. All right, Kelly, take it away.
Great. So, I found Dana's work and the SoMeDocs group to be so helpful personally, because when I first started sharing parenting advice and pediatric health information on social media about a year ago, I didn't know anyone else who was doing it personally. So I saw other people on Instagram and Facebook, but I didn't really know how to make that right for me. So the Facebook group was invaluable for me at connecting on a more personal level and getting more detailed advice as I started this journey. So my background is in pediatric complex care. So I did Harvard undergrad, Columbia Med School, and I after med school, did residency at the Children's Hospital at Montefiore. I stayed on there as a complex care attending, very academic, working with a small group of really sick patients in and out of the hospital. Then when I had my family, I was looking for something a little bit more family friendly, less emergencies and middle of the night calls. So I transitioned to working in public health. And it was when I made that switch that I started thinking about other ways, to share my knowledge and experience with that complex care group with others. So I saw the value in public health work in a new way. There's so much great stuff happening in academic circles, but often it takes years to reach patients. And in the process, patients can feel really lost and not get the advice from those academic types. So along those lines, I had a book idea that I was thinking about when I first started sharing advice on my Instagram handle, advice I give my friends. So I started slow, and Natalie Crawford's Instagram podcast was very influential, and I grew my account maybe to about 1,000 people, or maybe 2,000 before the pandemic hit. And then I found that everyone was really desperate for guidance. We obviously follow the primary health sources like the CDC and our local health authorities, but families wanted help interpreting what these organizations were saying so that they could make decisions for their family. So on my Instagram account, I started sharing more advice around that topic, and it grew really large, like 24,000 people now. Which was great. And I saw a demand for that sort of content, and I felt like called to provide guidance. I felt pretty passionate about it. So I wrote the book, Parenting in a Pandemic, How to Help Your Family Through COVID-19. And I know we're going to focus less on the content of the book and more about the process, because I know that's what you're here to learn about. So I had written, 20 Instagram posts about pandemic parenting. And I went to send out a newsletter because I had learned through the SoMe Docs Facebook group that newsletters and owning your audience rather than just depending on social media platforms and algorithms is a valuable tool. So I had a newsletter after a year of doing this that I hadn't ever used before. So I said, I'll just compile all my pandemic advice. And then when I did that, I noticed it was almost 50 pages. So that was the point when I was like, okay, I can write this book. And I didn't have any idea what I was doing. So I spent maybe 5 days on it and sent it to a friend of a friend who worked at a publishing house, who said, very encouraging things, and then explained to me that traditional publishing, in the summer of 2020, they were accepting proposals for publication in 2022. So like 2 years ahead. So for traditional publishing companies, a topic like this, especially for an author who doesn't have an editor or an agent or isn't established, it would have been impossible. So that in some ways saved me a lot of time because I just didn't consider traditional publishing. I think the decision between self-publishing and traditional publishing, it could be the topic of a whole nother talk. But I'm going to focus on the self-publishing process here because that's what I know and that's what I did. So once you decide, you have a topic and you're passionate about it and you really want to get it out there, you have to decide a little bit about your strategy. So there is the idea that you can go narrow or go broad. So Amazon is probably the biggest platform for all books. And they offer something called the KDP Select program, which you might have seen on your Amazon account, as those are the books that are allowed for Kindle Unlimited. So you can go long on Amazon and commit to using them and enter that program, or you can go wide in your distribution and you can pursue publishing through multiple platforms like Apple Books or Barnes & Noble, Nook Books, and keep your options open. And, I think that was the first major fork in the road, was making that decision. And I think it depends a little bit on your goals, because If your goal is to grow your brand, having an unlimited book or a very low priced book is probably the best way to do that, because you'll find it's easier to get a lot of readers quickly. There's some free marketing stuff built in. I decided not to do that. And actually, in hindsight, I'm not even sure why. I think because I worried about having difficulty with having just one vendor. And some people out there, like, especially I have a lot of followers who are pretty savvy about supporting local businesses and stuff like that. I thought they would not like my followers. I did not think would like my commitment to Amazon, given, that they're such a big box retailer. So I decided to go broad. And then when you're doing that, you have another decision to make, which is whether you're going to, use Draft to Digital or another one of these publishing hubs. So what those companies do is they take a piece of your profits, like as much as 10%, for managing your relationships with all these different vendors. So if you want, you can do your whole book through Draft to Digital, and they just take a little piece of your profits, and they manage and they make sure all the stores have the same description. And if you update the version, they keep all the versions updated. So it is easier, but again, you have to pay. So because Amazon was estimated to be like one of my biggest outlets, and indeed it has been probably my biggest, maybe 90% of my books have been purchased on Amazon, I chose to go direct with Amazon through KDP and then reach all those the broad range of online book retailers by using Draft to Digital. And, there are other options besides Draft to Digital, but Draft to Digital is the big one. So let's talk about logistics a bit. So I typed up my book on my Mac in a program called Pages, which comes for free. The nice thing about Pages is if you want to publish directly to Apple Books and only to Apple Books, you can just instead of clicking print, click publish. Like, they make it that easy. So Pages is very much made to think about, making a table of contents and formatting and all of those things. So working in the program that I was ultimately going to publish in did save me a lot of time, although I think some people prefer drafting their work in programs like Scrivener, which are more geared towards authors. They might make it a little easier to manage your footnotes, or they might make it a little easier if you're rearranging big sections of your writing, but those actually cost a fair amount of money. So I didn't pursue those. I used Pages. And at the end, when I was ready, I could export from Pages into what's called a Mobi file, which then I could upload to Draft and Digital and Amazon, and that was my ebook. So formatting an ebook is not hard. Because you have a template that you can download either from Amazon or use the one from Pages. The formatting is pretty simple because you have to have compatibility with the different e-readers. So the tricky part was thinking about like the table of contents and making sure that was functional, and making sure all the footnotes were functional. But there isn't as much flexibility in terms of formatting. If you try to do something fancy in formatting your ebook, you may fail and have somebody on a certain device pull it up and have it look silly. So the ebook was pretty quick to get out in terms of content. I hired someone to design my cover, which I would highly recommend because covers drive sales remarkably. It's very important to have a high quality cover. I've seen a lot of physician books out there that aren't so engaging, and the cover has to be engaging both at the thumbnail level and bigger. So I would strongly recommend that you invest in cover design. It doesn't have to be that expensive. You can find people willing to do it for relatively cheap and get somebody who's experienced. What happens is, like, a friend of a friend introduced me to someone named Victoria Black who works at Penguin and did this as a side project. And so it was totally reasonable. Okay. So at this point, at the end of July, I had written 50,000 words. I had done the formatting and gotten the cover for the ebook, and I just hit publish. I had it in my head that August 1st was like the day that it was going to go live, and it did. It takes about 3 days after you click submit. So that was great. But it was at that point that I realized that I hadn't spent any time developing like a marketing or publicity plan, which was probably a mistake. So I think for those of you who are starting out, I would recommend before you start writing the book to have a plan for how you're going to promote it. There are some big blogs, like there's one called Kindlepreneur, and there's a Facebook group called 20 Books to 50K, which they both have a lot of resources for self-published authors. And doing that in advance would definitely help you to be more successful. Because what I learned is that most authors spend a lot of time and energy on that month before publishing to make sure they have a big release. And if you have a big release, then you get higher in the algorithm for Amazon and other publishing companies to like promote your book, and it increases your visibility. So investing more time and energy in your release is worth it. And it probably would have been worth it for me if I delayed my book by a week or two so that I could focus on that. But you live, you learn. So it was at that point that I also decided to make a paperback copy and an audiobook. So I'll talk about the audiobook first because it's a whole nother can of worms. So there's a company called Findaway Audible or Findaway Voices, which is sort of the draft to digital for audiobooks. And there is a way through Audible or Amazon ACX is what it's called to publish your audiobook that way. So again, you could choose to go, narrow or broad. If you go narrow just on Audible through Amazon, the thing to know is it can take 2 or 3 months for them to approve your book. So for me, because my topic was so timely, I couldn't put all my eggs in that basket, and I chose to go wide by putting it out there on Findaway Voices, which has Chirp and Google Play and Apple and all these other platforms for audiobooks. And by making that choice, you take a hit of like 20% of your royalties on Amazon. So it's financially, if you are going to put all your eggs in one basket, you get a financial payout in terms of royalties from Amazon, but you have to give up control that they may take months to approve your book. And you won't be able to really plan around the release of the audiobook. So both of the companies offer ways within their platform to hire people to read your book and edit your audio, which I was planning to do. But then my husband said, if you're trying to grow your brand as an author and get people to know you, you should be the one to read it. And I listened to him, which was maybe a mistake because recording an audiobook is very time consuming and difficult. So I bought a microphone on Amazon, and I sat in my closet surrounded by soft clothes to muffle the sound. And I used all my free time in like a week to read the book. The final audiobook was like 5 hours. I would say easily it took me 10 to read it because you make mistakes and you have to edit them out. I hired someone to edit the audio because, again, I found it so time consuming. I found them on Fiverr. And it was easy to find somebody who had a lot of experience and more technical knowledge than I did. So I would strongly recommend that if you're trying to record your own audiobook, you don't edit it yourself because it gets pretty technical pretty quickly. I'm like a computer savvy person who designed my own website, but I needed help with the audio stuff. So that was the audiobook experience. The nice thing about going wide for the audiobook is that I could also sell it myself on my website. So the nice thing about that is that I get all the royalties. So because I retain all the rights, both to the ebook, print copy, and audiobook, I can do whatever I want with it. And people do buy it through my website directly. So that's a nice way to capture more royalties. So then about the paperback copy. So I think this is another area where I learned the hard way that formatting a paperback book. I actually was the editor of the Harvard Crimson, my undergrad newspaper. I did design and layout for them, so I have experience in layout. And I thought, hey, like I'll just lay out the book myself, and I definitely could do it. But it definitely was something I probably spent 10 or 20 hours on, because it is very time consuming to make it look good. And there's a lot of formatting tricks that you need to know in terms of getting the page numbers right. And one place I finally just gave up was most books have like headers and footers with the chapter names that change appropriately. And I honestly couldn't figure it out. So I would say that layout of a book is another good place to outsource. So that brings me to some of my like most important takeaway tips for you. So if you're considering self-publishing your book, I would pick something that you're really passionate about, because it's going to require sustained effort. It was only because I was passionate about helping parents at this time that I was able to write the book so quickly and prioritize it during kind of a stressful time when my kids and family needed me to be like, no, I'm going to write my book now. So picking a passionate topic, a topic that you feel strongly about, will help power you through the whole process. And I think going in, I underestimated the work of publishing. So I would say easily that, I wrote the book in July, and here we are in November, only a few months later. I have probably spent 10 times the energy on the logistics of publishing it that I did with the actual content, which is crazy. I never thought of that with books, but it is quite true that, you're going on podcasts to promote it, or you're trying to find TV and print media to talk to you and promote your book. You take the time to work with all the vendors you're working with. The actual writing and the actual content is only a small piece of the puzzle. So I think know that going in and allocate the energy for that. From what I've heard from other authors is a lot of us underestimate that work. And even if you go the traditional publishing route, what I'm told is that you're still the driver for your book's success in that way. You can outsource audiobook editing and formatting the book and cover design, but you cannot outsource some of the really important promotional work that you'll do, because the best stuff, even if you hire a publicist, which can be very expensive, the best connections will come from you directly because you are your brand. So your work collaborating with other physicians and collaborating with other influencers in your space will make a really big difference. So remember to budget the time appropriately, because I was sort of beat by the rush to get the book out. And at one point I was like, oh man, I don't want to do this marketing work. But then what was motivating for me was to know that if I didn't do it, no one would read the book. So I had to kind of kick myself in the pants and learn a whole new skill set. I feel like many people in healthcare don't, unless you're in private practice in a competitive area, you may like me not have sold anything before or thought of yourself as a salesperson, but your ideas are something that you have to sell to other people. You have to make them think they're important and valuable and have your readers trust you. So I think that's one of the most important things to keep in mind, is that you have to prioritize the energy for the whole process, not just the content of the book. So I think that's pretty much the biggest takeaway tips. I don't know if you have any questions or things that you'd like to hear more about.
Okay. That was fabulous. Thank you so much, Kelly. I think you've added so many pearls. I actually had trouble keeping up with all the things you said because it was so valuable. So thank you for that. Okay, there are some questions. Those of you watching again, if we could hear you, if we could see you say hello or leave a comment on what really resonated, it truly helps. We use the hashtag SoMeDocs lectures for these particular ones. So if anything particularly resonated and you're active on Twitter or LinkedIn or Instagram, use hashtag SoMeDocs lectures. I do see a comment coming in and a question. So let's just go straight into questions. All right. I'm interested in writing a picture book for children with profits going to a specific 501c3 to raise money for osteosarcoma in memory of my 17-year-old son who passed away last November. Oh, wow. Is it possible to do this?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so sorry for your loss, and I am impressed with your commitment to trying to empathize, to make lemons from this and do something good to give back. So now that I'm having this bigger Instagram account, people send me their books like this all the time because they're trying to get publicity for them and share them. And I've seen a lot of books that aren't doing very well in this space. And I think a huge driver of success in the children's books is the illustrations. So I would really recommend that you spend extra time on the design aspect because people purchase beautiful books for their kids, and I think that will drive a lot of your sales. Like you can look at Elon Books is the biggest example of a self-published children's book having success. And they, so you might look at their account to see how they've done it. There's another one that's, I'm blanking on the name now, but it's an Instagram-driven account about being inclusive to children with special health needs. And she's written books, like it's about a giraffe that gets fitted for a wheelchair. And it's done really well. And I think it's because it's visually appealing and because she's put a lot of work into promoting it. And that goes back to that. So I think books aren't a great way to make money or raise funds, but they are good at raising awareness and reaching people. So I think just make sure you have your goals, in line with what's the reality of the situation. I was told that most self-published books don't sell more than 250 copies. So if you're investing in the publication, costs, it may be difficult to recoup depending on the cost of your illustrator. But if your goal is less fundraising and more reaching people, you may be able to partner with children's hospitals or places that would give away the book, to expand the reach of the message.
I think what's really important also to mention is just that you've got to prioritize what's important to you. Because at the end of the day, right, first of all, we're dealing with perfectionists, many of us, right? We're physicians. A lot of us are type A's. We want everything perfect. But we can't have everything perfect because we've got a day job. A lot of us do, right? And so even just this topic, the self-publishing, right? You're sort of saying, I'm going to self-publish because of what you mentioned, that instead of waiting till 2022 to get my book out, I prefer to do it the quicker route because for me, what's important is either awareness of a message or maybe thought leadership. Like I want to be known for something and grow my brand, and they're all intersecting.
I think that's an important point though, too, because in terms of my Instagram account, a lot of people reached out to me to be on their podcast or to collaborate with them once I had like a product that I was promoting. I mean, because essentially that's what it is, because I think that gives you like a predictability or like people know what they're getting when they interact with you.
Absolutely.
There's value to self-publishing a book so you have something to stand in front of. And I would also say that as people who may be type A, you look at nonfiction books with a new lens and see that some of them aren't so earth-shattering. Like your message is probably a lot of these messages are pretty simple. Like even some of the best-selling parent books, like The Whole Brain Child, is like a pretty simple concept at the core of it. And it is the promotion of it and the connecting with like-minded people and forming a community of parents who have the same parenting goals that has made that book such a success. It's not actually like the content of the book.
Yeah,
so
for
the
sure.
content matters. It does, but it also matters these other features.
No, for sure. And I think that's the difficulty of self-publishing from the author perspective, is just that how do you stand out in a sea of noises, and in a sea that where the public knows that to self-publish is really just to self-publish. And so there's no qualifying factors. You don't need any validation that your book has good content. So you've got to work even harder to promote yourself and prove that it's quality. And some of that goes towards what you said in terms of self-promotion. And you're either going to shell out the big bucks, right, for a PR company, versus doing it yourself or aligning with a company like SoMeDocs that literally strives to help physicians feel empowered by marketing their brands. And it's interesting you also said that about the product, because really everything we do right now in terms of blogging and podcasting, it is essentially a product, which is why we call it branding, because it's branding our intellectual property. It's making our intellectual property into a product. But I think, would you agree that physicians have a hard time wrapping their heads around it, and we need physical papers to like make it work?
Yeah, I think sometimes we lack the confidence that our ideas have value, but I think that they do. But I think they only have value if you can reach the people that need to hear them, which can be, I think, the most difficult part is like finding the right
your target audience.
Or your target audience, and that along those lines, when you think about publicity, in my experience, I got some big, like I was on TV in Texas and Florida, and had really no noticeable bump in my book sales, despite like millions of people watching those segments. And then like another physician through SoMeDocs, like Krupa and Dr. Craig Canapri, you know, they're pediatricians who have newsletters, and they emailed out to their, you know, out of the kindness of their hearts, because they liked my book. They shared it with their people, and I got at least 50 or 100 book sales from them, even though they were pretty small newsletters. And I think that just goes to show you that having targeted access to people who are your target audience matters a lot more than like the size. Like, it's nice to get on the Today Show for your legitimacy value, but that's not how you're going to sell your books. Like, you're going to sell your book by people having a clickable link from someone they trust and value. So
I love that. Guys, this is commentary, right? I can think of so many metaphorical equivalents. For example, when we podcast, a lot of advertisers that are willing to invest in our podcasts are doing it even if our audience is small, but when it's niche down, if it matches their target audience, you will find that it's a match. Meaning, a company may invest in someone with only 500 people in their audience versus someone with 10,000 people in their audience, if those people, the 500 people, are the niche that they're targeting. So that's a concept that's a little bit hard to follow, but is really at the basis of marketing and advertising. So I love that. I love that Kelly experienced it in real life, that she went on a show like the Today Show, and yet there was only a limited amount of sales that increased after that, whereas she worked with some of her colleagues and suddenly, right, there was more of a blow up.
Yeah. And I think it's nice because it's given me more confidence in terms of work. Because once you get to have more than 10,000 followers on Instagram, I think people start sending you stuff and asking you to promote their stuff.
Right.
But it's knowing that, like, having people paying attention to your account, your followers have value, has also given me the confidence to, like, now I've started like asking companies to send me stuff, to give away stuff for free. And like Sarah Silks, this brand that I like personally, I reached out to them and they gave away like $1,000 worth of product to my followers just because I asked. And it's good to know your own value too. Yeah. Like I was on the receiving end of other people like having value in their newsletters, and then it gave me the confidence to understand that my account has value too.
For sure. Oh, I love that. I love that. I teach it regularly. And on the flip side, it's important to know your value in saying no as well. So I feel like a lot of physicians now, as they're sort of grappling with this online presence, they're so used to being nice and being altruistic. but they're not used to this entrepreneurial factor that needs to take over, because you can't say yes to everybody. First of all, there are people out there who are trying to take advantage. And second, it might not be on brand. It might not match. Your target audience may not match their target audience. And so sometimes we need to say no. Kelly, have you ever felt that or needed to say no?
Yes, I'm trying to get better at that because I know over time, like if I share products that I don't really love with the people following me, like they'll lose their trust in me. And I don't want that to happen. And so now I have to be really careful and warn people, like if they want me to look at their thing, like I might not want to promote it. And I have to tell them that up front, because it makes it easier then to tell them later that I don't want to be involved. And
I love it. Yeah.
I think it also depends on your goals. Sometimes I talk to my husband about like, should I try to do affiliate sales or like make a little money now off my account? And my husband's like, no, like invest in your brand and wait until you're bigger and then decide what you want to do with it. And so I think it starts to get tempting when you see other accounts making money through advertising at a smaller size, but you have to think about the legitimacy of your voice. And I think people in healthcare, like, I think when people see you advertising, it can threaten your legitimacy.
Right. I think that's huge. I think it's very important. I think each one of us needs to just do a little introspection where our brands are concerned. There's nothing wrong with it. Well, that's an ethical question, whether some parts are wrong, some parts aren't. It was raised in the lecture on Tuesday night by Sarah Mojarad. She called it white coat marketing, which was very interesting. Of course, that talked about something else, particularly on ingestible items that are promoted through from physician accounts. That's up for debate and ethically is a question. But I think in general, doctors just aren't used to publicly advertising, whereas the rest of the world is. And so this is an ethical matter that needs to be discussed openly. And I think each one of us has our own brands at this point. And that's what's so empowering, is that at a certain stage in our life, we can make those decisions ourselves, but we need to consider how our audience views us and what they trust. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you have to be also selective about the people you're collaborating with, because you have to do a little research and make sure you know what you're getting into. So before I go on a podcast or do a live with anybody, I always want to know what they're about, because you don't want to I think just collaborating, even if no money is changing hands, is also like an endorsement. You're driving value to their account. So you have to really think about if that's a message you support. So in pediatrics, I would make sure they're not like anti-vaxxers I'm accidentally collaborating with.
Yeah, that's a good point. And actually, I'll use this as a quick learning lesson from my perspective. And I'm curious, what you think of this, is that also, even when you're collaborating, you've got to make sure that you understand expectations in advance. And a lot of physicians aren't familiar with this, but having dabbled in this field for a really long time, I am extremely familiar with the switcheroo, right? It's somewhat of a switcheroo in that you're agreeing to bringing your intellectual property to someone's show, but then after the fact, suddenly there's expectations. Well, why don't you? Well, now I want it shared in this one and this, and it's like, wait, my space is my space, and this doesn't match. Like, I brought my intellectual property to you, but this doesn't match what I'm doing. So again, it's laying it all out almost like a negotiation would, as in, what are you expecting of me coming on your podcast? And then what am I expecting in return?
Absolutely. I think that's really important. And I think as somebody who's been on a bunch of podcasts recently, I would say I really appreciate the ones that provide more information up front with regards to that. Like, if you say that, we're going to record this podcast, anticipating that we'll air on this date, I will do this, this, and this, and I will ask that you do this. Then it gives me a chance to be like, yes or no, and to have just before we record it. I also think it's really helpful to have more written details about the podcast target audience, because it helps you be better prepared as a podcast guest.
I think more and more as a society, we are going to have more of these things written down and ready at the go as we become as we fit ourselves into this online sphere where numbers do matter as much as we hate to say, and influence matters, and reach, and also target audience and your specifics. So yes, I agree with you. And I think, again, upfront transparency, not even from I'm going to do something bad perspective, but just in a, do we fit as a, together, do we fit? Does my audience fit you? And do you fit my audience? I think it's important to weigh where strategy is concerned. All right, let me go to a question here. This one was partly answered. Do you recommend photos in the book, cover art resources, which you touched on actually? And can we use camera photos?
So you can, I think definitely, in nonfiction books, the formatting, increases the readability a lot. And so in hindsight, that's part of why I wish I had outsourced, my book, because I know if I formatted it better, with like columns in the side with takeaway tips or blowout quotes, I think healthcare providers sometimes we're used to jargon and more dense content that most lay people don't necessarily want to read in that format. So I definitely think that having images in your book, regardless of what kind of book it is going to add value to the people who are reading it. Bullet points here and there, those kinds of things. I think camera photos, it depends. I think that you have an issue with print quality. So most self-published books are black and white, and most EPUBs, or a lot of EPUB readers, are black and white. So they're not going to look as good. So if it's on your print cover, you can normally figure it out. Like I had a little picture of myself in the corner. But even that, I used a professional photo because it has to be a really good quality photo to print well. So I think it can make it look unprofessional if your cover is not like
on point.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. It's so funny as you talk, so much of what you're saying resonates from a social media perspective. So likewise on social media, a lot of times it is the aesthetics that draw in your target audience. And from there you can, write to them and educate them, et cetera. But even there, you've got to make sure that you don't overwhelm. So you're right, the general public. And I think part of that is just how our society is evolving and doing things quicker and expecting things to just come in shorter bits. I think we need to shy away from the way traditional medicine communicates in that like lengthy, lots of details, because we're so evidence-based. And when we're targeting the general public, we need to be more succinct. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And the heartbeat doctor, is it Dr. Khan? I think she does a great job of that. She delivers a lot of heavy content, but she puts in on Instagram enough of her personality, and she spends her images.
Yeah, she's great.
I think she's a great example of like, you can talk about serious stuff, but balance it with either like healthy lifestyle stuff or personal details about you that people want to know who they're trusting. That's like the whole idea behind social media. So
I love it. I love it for many reasons, but I love her like chai tutorial. And that's an instance where she teaches heavy cardiology things. And yet she will, and I think we're talking about this, and yet she will teach me how to make her chai. Or she's got one about her hair, and I literally went out and purchased something because it was an interesting thing that she told me about, and so I went out and did it. That's A. And B, she will be on the panel in the upcoming Conversations with Shem series. So for those of you watching, check out the lineup. It's coming slowly on our website with the panel bios and everything. So I'm excited to see her there. All right. I think we're going to ask maybe 1-2 questions, Max to wrap this up. Okay. How about, would you recommend an editor for self-publishing?
Yes. Oh, so I forgot to mention that. So this is a good reminder. I did try to hire an editor at one point. So I asked a friend of a friend, because really there are a ton of like services and people out there who will edit, but it's hard to know their quality without a word of mouth referral, because obviously you want somebody who has like very good taste and experience. And so I was lucky enough to find a referral of like the publishing industry has been so hard hit, like traditional media. So the newspaper had just folded, and the managing editor was like looking for work. So So he was hugely experienced and willing to do it for $200, which was like a steal.
Oh, wow.
You know, what he told me was like, you don't need an editor. You need a proofreader or like a line editor who will like check the commas and I didn't even know that those were like two different things. But I think if you're developing in the structure and content of your book,
right,
you need an editor. And if you have a finished book product, you want like a copy editor, and they're much cheaper. So if you can develop the structure and the idea and the content, then you probably can get by with just the copy editor, I think.
Okay. And this is probably a good time, just because this is being done through SoMeDocs, and SoMeDocs really aims to empower physicians, to just give a shout out to Dr. Christopher Burton, who does a lot of this book stuff and is also one of the leaders in our SoMeDocs public space. So I'm giving a shout out to him, but also Nicole Swiner has a publishing company. So for those of you that are interested in supporting physician brands, which is near and dear to my heart, and I'm sure to yours, Kelly, look into that. All right, last but not least, this is a good one. Any advice for the perfectionists among us, in moving forward and not feeling frozen in the publication process?
Yeah, I think I had a big issue with this, because I had to really say, like, if I publish a book about parenting in the pandemic in October, it will like have much less value than if I get it out in August. So I had to force myself kind of to let go, because obviously I could have improved it having written it in a month. Right. So I think having a deadline and sticking to it is helpful. And I think understanding that that there's always more you can do is also there's always going to be something else you can do or add. The nice thing about the order in which I released my books, so I guess the not nice thing is that doing the ebook first, ebooks have lower cost and thus lower royalties. So I sold a bunch of ebooks because that was like my big release was an ebook. Mm-hmm. But the nice thing was I could go back and edit things and add things to it if I wanted. So while I was formatting the paperback and reading out the audiobook in my closet, I found a few things I wanted to change, and I was able to change it. And then you just update the ebook. Amazing.
Like a blog.
So it's nice to know that ebooks you can update. But obviously paperbacks you can't. But you just have to let go and then write another book later, maybe.
It's like a blog that you can update versus Twitter, where you can't. Once you tweet, you can't edit, whereas the other social media platforms usually allow you to edit. It's so interesting. It's interesting because social media platforms are, in essence, a way to, well, we all know this, but some of us need it stated that it is still a way to publish your intellectual property. In fact, some people will consider, and this is a tip for you guys that are contemplating publishing but aren't sure how you have the time to put it all together, is you can publish your blogs. So you could literally take the blog articles that have a common thread and a theme, and you can kind of package it into one.
That's exactly how I started with like my posts. I put them in the order and then filled in what was missing. And what I forgot to mention is copyright.
Oh,
and ISBNs. That's kind of a technical topic, but as long as you put the copyright page in your book, like most books have a copyright page, you own the copyright, but then you have to file, go to like copyright.gov to file the copyright. It's only like $30, but you have to do it within 90 days of publishing your book to make it official. And then you might have a better standing in court if somebody tries to steal your property. And somebody else told me, I don't even know why, but you have to buy your own ISBNs, which is like the book number. Some of these companies will provide it for free, an ISBN, but it's better if you buy it yourself through Bookster, I think it's called, so it's just another thing. They're cheap. They're like $30, but I guess you own the ISBN and you own more of the ability to sell the same book in different platforms.
Okay, so you've shared just fabulous pearls. So first of all, thank you on behalf of all of the SoMeDocs who will be seeking self-publishing. And it's going to be such a good thing for all of us to do, because I believe physicians will be more empowered when we start getting our evidence-based medicine messages out there and people hear from the experts directly. So I thank you so much for coming on board and for paying it forward on this How to Physician series. So Kelly, I'll speak to you in a minute. I'm going to take you off stage just to wrap things up. Before I do that, you can follow Kelly at Advice I Give My Friends. She's got a ton of followers. She's got tons of fans, and you can also contact her probably through there, because again, this is the great part about today, is that you can actually contact the physician that you are following at their own discretion. So they've got their own parameters for how to contact them. So thank you so much, Kelly. I'm going to now remove you, and I'll be with you in a minute. Guys, for those of you that are tuning in or catching this later, thank you. I hope that this was helpful to you guys that are considering publishing a book. If you haven't seen some of SomiDoc's newest resources, you are indeed missing out. Check out somidocs.com. We're revamping. We've got a new logo. We've got new resources coming for both physicians and members of the general public. And we have a lot in the works that is growing to help you, the physician, expand your online brand and shine in unique ways, and then to connect it with your target audience, whether that's a physician or the public. If you have any questions, reach out. I am easily reachable at Dr. Coriel, or I am also the creator of SomiDocs. And that's it. Have a fabulous rest of your Thursday. Don't forget to subscribe so we are in touch, and bye.